guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a eye tutorial and worth the buy or not review on the fairly new Huda Beauty Nude palette. This beautiful beauty right here. This palette is one that I wasn't going to pick up, and I actually mentioned that in my anti-haul video. I was like, I'm not getting that next. But some of you guys asked me to purchase it, and I went ahead and was looking into it, and as soon as I started looking into it was the Sephora VIB Rouge sale, and I was like, okay, 20% off, not getting that for full price, so I'm gonna use my 20% off on it and get a little bit of a discount. So luckily for me, I was able to get it then, but I'm excited to give you guys my thoughts on this palette. I've honestly been using and abusing this palette. Like, I've used it a lot over the weekend, and I think I have some well-developed thoughts on it. So if you want to continue watching and learn more about the Huda Beauty Nude palette and want to know if I enjoyed it or not, and also want to see swatches and an eye tutorial, then please go ahead and continue watching, because I know you do not want to miss the tea on this video. Okay, so we are going to be starting off with this eye right here. And basically what we're gonna start off with is just priming our lid. And this palette does come with a lid primer. It's kind of like a concealer type of situation, and it's in the shade called Concealed. So I'm gonna be taking a little bit of that shade. I'm just going to be using my Morphe M173. This is my favorite brush to just pack on this type of kind of like eye primer onto the lid. And we're just gonna apply that all over. I feel like this concealer, primer, whatever you want to call it, is really sheer. You have to really kind of press down onto the pan to really get a good amount of product onto your lid. And it does feel like the type of consistency that will crease fast. So I'm gonna start off with the Shadow Lace. It's this very light purple. It's like a lilac purple. We're just gonna be placing this all over our crease. Windshield wiper motions, and like I've mentioned, windshield wiper motions is going to help kind of blow up the color. Such a beautiful color. It definitely looks very pigmented on top of this concealer shade. I feel like whenever I go in with a primer or concealer, I like to immediately take the shadow that we're gonna start off with right away, because if I go ahead and set it with loose powder, I find that it's not as pigmented as it would be if we just did it this way. I've really learned that technique once I started to use my Urban Decay Shadow primer potion, because I feel like it just makes a big difference when you go ahead and just apply the shadow directly on. And I'm gonna go in with a smaller Morphe brush. This is my M506, and I'm going to be going in with the shade Tickle. And we're just gonna be placing that directly onto where our crease folds, because this is gonna add a lot of depth into the eye socket. This color Tickle does have a lot of fallout though. I didn't even press that hard, and the fallout is like crazy. So we're gonna be taking one more color onto our creases, and we're gonna be taking the shade Tease. So we're basically just taking a range of purples and just kind of going from lightest to darkest purple to really add that intensity right on the crease. Then I'm gonna be taking my big fluffy blending brush, and I'm just gonna go in circular motions on these outer edges, because I do wanna diffuse those three colors into each other for a very gradual effect. I'm just using my Delium Tools tapered blender brush from the Golden Triangle collection, and you can see how that looks. It does kind of look like a purple eye right now, but we will fix this shortly. Now we're gonna be moving on to the next thing, which is using our Tarte Shape Tape Concealer. This is in the shade Medium Honey, and it's so funny because I like to just use this Tarte Shape Tape to create our creases. I don't really use it to conceal. I'm not that big of a fan of it for concealing. I know I'm crazy. So I'm putting it on this very skinny brush. This is another Delium Tools brush. This is the lip brush. And we're just gonna go ahead and carve out our crease. Okay, so this crease is cut and snatched. Now we're gonna be using a different brush, another flat brush, and we're going to begin applying the reflective shimmer shade, which is in the color Crave. And I'm just gonna use a dry brush because I wanna see the pigmentation of it. I do want to say when I applied it with my finger, it swatched beautifully, and I think it's because when you use your finger to go into these nice shadows, because they are glittery and kind of creamy, you press down harder than with a brush. So that's just something to note. The only reason I'm not using my finger for this is because I'm very precise about where I want the placement of the shadow to be. I feel like with my finger, because it is a little fatter than obviously a brush, it's gonna go over and it's going to kind of defeat the purpose of me even creating the cut crease. So that's just something right there. We're using the shade Crave. I don't even remember if I mentioned it. And we're using right now a dry brush. I mean, for using it dry, it's picking up a good amount of the product, but you really do have to press on the pan to kind of see that. I'm gonna be taking my MAC Fix Plus and really spritzing this. And we're gonna go back in the shade. Yeah, I think that's a little bit better. So when you go in with a dry brush, it just kind of gives it a more like texturized effect. When we first went in, I feel like you could really see the chunky glitters. But if you kind of want to make it more so of like almost like just like a very intense shimmer, going in with a wet brush will really give it that finish. Almost like a pearlesque shimmer. And then I'm going to take a little bit of my finger. It's gonna be a Rebel. I said I wasn't gonna use my finger because I want to make it look very precise, but I'm just gonna dab it like in certain areas. I'm not gonna bring it too close to the crease because I obviously don't want to interrupt that. I'm gonna kind of keep it centered down here. You can see when you use your finger, it's very reflective. So if you're not worried about your crease, you can go ahead and play around with it. You can see how foiled that looks now. I'm just gonna go ahead and finish this eye, and then we'll be right back to do the rest. We went ahead and did our lashes and of course our liner. So now we're gonna go ahead and finish off this look with a little bit of some brow bone highlights. I'm gonna be taking the shade that we used to set our lid, which was the shade Bear, and we are just going to be placing that on our brow bone. Like so. I feel like a nice matte cream white shade makes such a difference to that brow bone. Do you see that? Like compared to this side that has nothing on, I feel like it just makes it a little bit more dramatic looking, and it just adds that really good intensity. And now we're just gonna go ahead and take the same color that we used in our crease that we started with, the color Lace, the first color, and we're just gonna be placing this on our lower lash line. Just to kind of like wrap the look up. Because it is more of a pinky toned eye look, I kind of just want to keep it as like natural looking as possible. I'm obsessed with this makeup, oh my gosh. Like I am so obsessed. Okay, so this is the completed eye look, as you guys can see. I will also have all the products that I used on my face listed down below in the description box, so you guys can go ahead and check that out. But right now, I'm gonna go ahead and dive into the Huda Beauty Nude palette, which is right here, this beautiful little situation. I do want to start off by saying that this palette is a very hefty priced palette. It does retail for, I want to say $62 or $65. It's in the 60s range, but it is expensive. It's a very expensive palette. We can do so many other things with that type of money. I totally get it. But I'm here to give you guys today my full thoughts on it. As you guys already saw in the little mini tutorial I did with the palette, you guys kind of got an idea on how the shadows perform. Now, I didn't go ahead and use every single shadow because of course you can't use every single shadow, but I tried to use the shadows that I felt like would make a really beautiful look today. So that's what I went ahead and did. I also will have swatches included in this portion of the video, so you guys can see how they look on my complexion, and also so you guys can kind of get an idea of how the formula and the texture of it looks on actual skin. So I want to start off by letting you guys know that there are 10 matte shades in here. I feel like the matte shades that they selected for this palette are very beautiful and are very nice transition color shades, which will look great for the crease work, to transition two colors together. Also, they make really good shades for lid work if you want to do lid work. I know this shade Bear is a shade that is very essential to me whenever I do work on my lids, because I like to use it kind of like as a setting base. I also feel like it's a very pretty shade to just use all over the lid. Overall, I feel like it makes a great color, and I feel like that's one of the few shades that I prefer not to be missed out in a palette. All the other shades definitely go along the nude little color scheme that they wanted to incorporate. I know some people were complaining about how it really wasn't true to nude, which I understand where you're coming from, but I will touch on this in a little bit. I just kind of want to go through the types of textures that we have in here. So you gotta have a good selection. You have some nice in-between shades, then you have the shades start to become darker and you get some nice beautiful like purpley tones on this side of the palette. Then you also get 4 reflected shimmer shades, which are these two right here, and then this one and that one. I have to say that out of the glitter ones and the reflective ones, my favorite ones after using this palette a little bit over the weekend were definitely the reflective ones. If you use your finger, it's going to look absolutely phenomenal. Now you guys saw me use a brush, a flat brush, to lay it all over the lid. You guys also saw me use it wet and dry. The reason I used the brush was because for this particular look that I was doing, I really wanted to make sure that I really cut the crease perfectly so that the colors on the lid were very precise and stayed just where I wanted to place it. That's why I used the nice brush. But if you aren't doing it that way, or you don't care to keep everything specifically on the lid, then you should definitely use your fingers because it looks so gorgeous with fingers. I did go ahead and use my fingers as you guys saw in the tutorial. I wanted to kind of get a little bit more intensity out of it towards the end of me actually using the shadow on the lid, and I feel like it made a big difference. I also feel like these do perform very nicely when you use them dry and when you use them wet. Now when you use them wet, they do become more of that like pressed shimmery color, almost like this pearlesque shade over here. But they just have a really nice buttery consistency when you use your finger and you just swipe it on the skin. It looks so good. And then you also got these 2 glitters, which to be honest, I'm not a big fan of those glitters. I feel like the colors, I can see how they're going with this theme right here on this side, but I just feel like they're too similar. In my swatches, you guys will see that I just feel like they look very, very similar to each other. I wish that they would have incorporated a different color, maybe just kept this one and then incorporated something that was a little bit on a different side of the color spectrum, because I feel like they just look the same to me. And honestly, I'm not a big fan of using glitter like this on my eyes. I personally rather use the glitter out of like a Stila, one of those that you can like take it out with the doe foot applicator, as opposed to a pressed glitter, because I feel like pressed glitters are so messy. Now for these, you definitely need to use your finger. They will not look good if you use a brush. You won't get any payoff. You'll probably get like one little piece of glitter and that's it. So that's how I would recommend going in with these, because I feel like they definitely don't apply well with a brush. You definitely want to use your finger. And also you would probably want to use some glitter glue because there may be some intense fallout. These I didn't have that much fallout on my under eye, which I was very grateful for, because I did actually go ahead and do my foundation before I did the eyes. So you just want to keep that in mind because that's something to note. So you won't have issues doing your foundation first, but you can always do the shadows first and then the foundation. It's just really your preference. And then after that, you got one nice shimmery color. It's very similar to all the consistencies we usually see when we have mattes and shimmers. So it's that type of consistency. And also I feel like this shade was so buttery. I feel like out of all the shades we have in here, this was probably the most buttery one that just went on so nice and smooth with one swipe. And it gave you some really intense color payoff. Now I do want to talk about this one though, because I feel like this is another color like the glitters that I just felt like could have used a different color. I feel like the color is pretty, but it just looks so similar to everything over here that I just wish that they would have used something else, maybe like a champagne gold or just something different. I just feel like this is just too much of the same thing going on here that I'm just like, why? Oh, and then the last shade that we have in here is this concealer shade, which is basically supposed to be used as a base for your eyeshadows. I did go ahead and use that. That was the very first thing I used when I started doing my eye tutorial. And to be honest with you guys, I really I don't know, I was not a big fan of it. I thought it was okay. I definitely prefer using my Urban Decay Primer Potion, or even so like my MAC Painterly Paint Pot. I feel like the MAC Painterly Paint Pot does such a good job of being really creamy and like super pigmented. I just feel like this wasn't creamy enough. Like you just don't really get that much payoff out of it. I also feel like whenever I have this type of situation pressed in a palette, it's not gonna be good. And a lot of these shadows do have a lot of fallout. So like whenever I'm using the color Lace right here, I notice that there's a lot of fallout falling into that concealer shade. I'm just like, oh my God, it's getting messy. It's getting real messy. So those are pretty much my first thoughts on this palette. I know a lot of you guys asked about it. I know a lot of you guys asked me to compare this guy to the Urban Decay Cherry palette, and I think after using this a few times, so I have here my Urban Decay Naked Cherry palette, and I have the Nude palette over here. I want to start off by talking about the Urban Decay Cherry palette. So this palette is definitely one that I've been obsessed with. I've been using this nonstop, and I can see totally how you guys are seeing a lot of similarities in the color scheme with these. The biggest difference out of the two palettes is that this one doesn't have obviously those really intense texturized shimmers or those glitters in there. It's pretty much just like self-explanatory shadows that you constantly see in makeup brands. You have your matte shades and then you have your nice shimmer shades. It's just very easy to use. I would personally say for somebody that is new to makeup or somebody that doesn't like to be extremely like out there and adventurous with different types of textures of eyeshadows, I would say get this one if you've been eyeing both of them, because with this one, it's pretty straightforward. You get your typical mattes and you get your typical shimmers. You don't have to work too much to do certain looks. You don't have to like play around with it. Oh, like, oh, this isn't showing up the way I wanted to. I need to do some extra stuff. It's just there and you can just slap it on your lids and it's gonna look fantastic. So this is what they look like. I feel like there is some differences between the palettes. I feel like they don't look exactly the same. Of course, the textures of the eyeshadows are different like I mentioned earlier, but I also feel like the color scheme isn't like exactly the same. I feel like this one definitely has more of that nude vibe, and the cherry palette has more of like that darker tone vibe. Like there's more darker tone vibes in there. I feel like the most similar color situation between those two is this little zone right here. Like this little zone right here definitely screams cherry palette vibes. Everything else to me is pretty much more so on that nude theme that Huda Beauty wanted to create with this palette. So now we're gonna move on to the final thing, which is, do I think that this palette is worth the money or not? So here's the thing, I think that the concept is so beautiful, and I think that's what sells a lot of people to want to buy this, because they see it and they're like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Like my sisters who don't wear as much makeup as I do, when I showed them the palette, they were like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. Like this is beautiful. And I mean, it really is. Huda Beauty does such a good job of having phenomenal presentation, but then you hear the price point and you're just like, so it's just one of those things where it really comes down to, are you going to use these shadows? Now, I'm gonna just say this, and I think that'll kind of determine for you what you think is worth the buy or not for you. I feel like if you're somebody that is new to makeup and doesn't really use many eyeshadows or doesn't know how to use certain eyeshadows, I would say go ahead and get the cherry palette because like I mentioned, you just have your shimmers and mattes, very straightforward. You don't have to go ahead and use like a specific brush or a specific type of spray. Like I was using some MAC Fix Plus to make it look a little bit more reflective. Like if you don't have to play around with it too much, I feel like it would be a better purchase to get the Urban Decay cherry palette. But if you're somebody that's more experienced in makeup and you played with these different textures and you want this drama in your life, then I would say go for it because you know how to play around with these and not be like, okay, I have this beautiful palette, what am I gonna do with it? And then you try to do what you would do with a regular shimmer and it doesn't work out for you. You're just like, oh my God, this is trash. Why did I buy it? So I just think at the end of the day, it comes down to your preferences, how you do eyeshadow, and what you think is worth it for you. $60-something is quite the splurge, and I have to admit, when I went ahead and purchased this palette, I did purchase it during the Rouge 20% off sale because I was like, I don't think I can get myself to buy a 60-something palette just for the regular price. So that's when I went ahead and purchased it. I definitely still stand that I feel like this Urban Decay cherry palette was worth my buy, and it was a little bit more inexpensive. I think it was like $49 and then like $52 with tax, I'm pretty sure. So just probably like about $10 difference. But it's not that big of a deal, but I just think it really depends on what you would use and what you would think is great. So those are my final thoughts. I really hope that this video was useful. I tried so hard to go as in depth as I possibly could because I know that you guys wanted a review on this. Also wanted me to show some comparisons to the Urban Decay cherry palette. We're 20 minutes into this clip and my voice is about to give out, so you know what, I'm just gonna peace out. I really hope that you guys enjoyed watching this. If you did enjoy watching this, please give this video a big thumbs up. Lets me know to continue doing these types of videos, and if you're new to my channel, please go ahead and subscribe. I would love for you to become a member of family here on YouTube because I wouldn't want you guys to miss my fun videos for the world. And if you haven't hit that notification bell, go ahead and hit that so that you're notified every single time I upload a new video, because I don't want you guys to miss any of my fun videos, because let's be real, my videos are thebomb.com. So I'll be seeing you guys very, very soon for a brand new video. Bye guys.